Occupational Safety and Health by Myra Carter. Policies and Processes of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. In 1970, this was the year that the Occupational Safety and Health Act was founded and put into effect. There's two goals of the OSHA Act of 1970. The act was put into effect to help protect the safety and health of the men and women workers. This would provide a basic building block of education, training, research, and information when occupational safety and health would be involved. The OSHA Act pertains to all employees that are helping the company build into something greater. Administration and Enforcement. There are 3 federal agencies that help enforce and administrate the OSHA Act. There is one agency that is based out of the Department of Labor that is the main enforcement of the OSHA Act. This agency has the authority to do the following: promulgate standards, conduct inspections of workplaces, issue citations for violations, recommend penalties. The OSHA Act is working on the behalf of the Secretary of Labor. Standards. The Act has 3 different types of standards: interim standards, permanent standards, and emergency standards. Interim standards are standards that the Secretary of Labor issued within the first 2 years of the Act. Permanent standards are standards that are revised from the interim standards or new standards. Emergency standards are just as they sound. They are temporary standards under special circumstances. Feasibility. The Act puts this standard into play that will handle the toxic and harmful materials. There is 2 different perspectives: technological feasibility, economic feasibility. This uses technology to set the levels of exposure. It also uses the economy to be sure that it is satisfied with the results. Burden of proof. The Secretary is the one that must prove both feasibilities and enforce standards that deal with toxic materials. Prima facie case, which was proven by the Secretary in the case of Ch20 Corporation. The case was about citations that were issued against Gwinnett Corporation. In the end, the case was affirmed on all accounts. Variances. Variances can either be temporary or permanent. Permanent variances are granted when an employer can't comply with some type of regulation by the effective date. It can be granted after the employees are given notice of request and had the hearing. It can be in place for a year or 2 separate 6-month periods. Permanent variances are granted when the employer can provide evidence that it can follow all standards and regulations. If the variance is granted, then either the employees or OSHA may petition for it to be pulled or revoked. The Secretary of Labor can issue an experimental variance also to help improve techniques. Employee rights. In Section 11, sub C1 states that the employees that refuse to work under OSHA will be protected. Employees have the right to refuse work under OSHA at any given point. Know your rights. Inspections and investigation. Inspections are to ensure that the regulations are being followed by the employers. Inspections are targeted in the following order. First is to investigate the complaint of danger, investigate fatal and catastrophic accidents, investigate complaints filed by the employees stating they have hazardous environments, investigate high-hazard industries. Random general investigations. Record-keeping requirements. Records of illnesses and accidents are to be kept by a company that has over 8 employees. Occupational accidents must be documented if they involve any of the following: death, loss of consciousness, medical treatment, or other minor first aid, 1 or more days of lost work, restriction of work or motion, transfer to another job. Citations, penalties, abatement, and appeal. When a company violates the standard, they are issued with a written citation or notice of de minimis violations. De minimis violation is a technical violation that has no fine or remediation. Each citation must allow reasonable time for changes. They usually don't exceed 30 days. If the company doesn't fix the issue at hand, they will be fined no more than $1,000. Workplace violence. This is the most biggest safety concern nowadays. Homicide is the second most leading cause of death. Workplace violence has increased with the terrorist attacks recently. Workplace violence can be classified as followed: violence by emotionally enraged persons, violence by an angry spouse or relative of an employee, random acts of violence, violence against law enforcement or security, terrorism, and hate crimes. Documenting behavior. Incidents in the workplace violence or possible violent behavior should be documented as: record incidents immediately, record date, time, and location, note the behavior of the employees, note all persons near or involved, note performance standards and rules violated, record consequences, manager response, and employee's action to the manager's response. A supervisor's response. The supervisor should respond to potential workplace violence like the following: don't try to figure out what's going on with a person. Don't talk about alcohol unless it has occurred on the job. Don't ever cover for a friend or relative. Never ignore the problem at hand. Make sure they know everything is confidential. Be sure to let them know that the organization is concerned for their job performance. Make sure they know to make their own personal decisions. Prevention and evacuation plan. To prevent workplace violence, have a written policy, have a crisis management team, investigate all threats immediately. Evacuation plans are important to have in a workplace. Each of the plans should have a mock drill every so often, but not so routine in time. Packages and mail according to text. General mail handling. Be observant for suspicious packages and envelopes. Open all mail with a letter opener or by the method least likely to disturb the contents. Do not blow into the envelope. Do not shake or pour out the contents. Keep hands away from the nose and the mouth, and wash hands after handling mail. Things that should trigger suspicion: discoloration, crystallization, strange odor or oil stains, powder or residue, protruding wires or aluminum foil, excessive tape or string, unusual size or unusual weight for its size, lopsided or oddly shaped envelope, postmarks that don't match the return address, restrictive endorsements such as personal or confidential. The following are the works cited used in this presentation.